I said get out. Take that bastard child and leave my house. Seoul's winter night wrapped around Isla Monroe like a frozen shroud, but nothing could match the ice in her husband's words as he stood in their penthouse doorway. Get out. Take that bastard child and leave my house. 9 months pregnant, her body heavy with the weight of impending motherhood, Isla clutched her stomach as Christmas lights twinkled cruelly in the windows of surrounding buildings. Her fingers shook as she pulled out her phone. A wrong number. She'd meant to call her sister back home in London, but desperation made her careless. Her message went into the void. I need help. I'm pregnant and I have nowhere to turn. The response was immediate. Send me your location. Right now. She didn't know she just contacted the most feared man in Seoul. Didn't know that Park Jae-sung had been quietly obsessed with her for half a year. Didn't know that seeing her name flash across his encrypted phone would awaken something primal and consuming in his soul, and her entire world was about to shift on its axis. Isla stood on the curb, her designer suitcase lying on its side in the slush, her cashmere coat unable to button over her swollen belly. She stared at the address that appeared beneath the stranger's curt response. Gangnam, an area she'd only glimpsed from car windows during her brief time in Korea. Her hands were numb, her bank account frozen by her husband, her British passport worthless without money for a flight home. She glanced back at the building one final time and saw him, her husband, silhouetted against the warm light, another woman's arms wrapped possessively around his torso. Something fractured deep in her chest, but tears wouldn't come. She couldn't afford that luxury, not when her daughter needed her to be strong. She grabbed her suitcase handle and began the long walk toward the subway, her heels clicking against icy pavement. On the other side of the city, Park Jae-sung sat in his corner office 50 stories above Seoul. The city sprawled beneath him like a kingdom, glittering and cold. Around him, absolute silence. His organization knew better than to disturb him after dark, but his phone had vibrated with an incoming message that should have been impossible. His private line was untraceable, encrypted, known to exactly 7 people worldwide. Yet somehow, this woman, this Isla, had reached him. He read her words again, the fear bleeding through the text, the pregnancy, the emoji she'd accidentally included that made his jaw clench. He rose from his desk, grabbed his coat, and left without explanation. His driver understood not to ask questions. Isla barely made it to the subway platform before her knees buckled. She sank onto a bench, gasping for air, palm pressed against her belly where the baby kicked frantically as if sensing her mother's terror. She whispered promises to her unborn child, swore that everything would work out somehow even though she couldn't imagine how. The platform was nearly deserted. A few commuters glanced her way, then quickly looked elsewhere. No one offered assistance. She checked her phone again. The address remained on her screen. Gangnam Station, 12 minutes by train. She had no idea who waited for her there. At this point, she didn't care. What choice did she have? She stood, gripped her suitcase, and moved toward the waiting train. Jae-sung's black Mercedes pulled up outside Gangnam Station 18 minutes later. He emerged into the falling snow, his long wool coat pristine against the white-dusted night. His men followed at a respectful distance, silent as shadows. He didn't need to issue orders. They understood. His dark eyes swept across the late-night crowd, the stragglers heading home, the drunk businessmen stumbling toward taxis. Then he spotted her. A foreign woman, obviously pregnant, struggling with luggage too heavy for her condition. Her coat was expensive but inadequate, her face drawn with exhaustion, and when she lifted her gaze when their eyes connected across the snowy plaza, something in Jae-sung's chest stopped, then restarted with a different rhythm, heavier, hotter, more dangerous. He moved toward her without conscious thought. Isla froze when she saw him approach. Tall, lean, moving through the crowd like smoke, effortless and unstoppable. People parted for him instinctively. His face was devastatingly handsome in a way that made her breath catch. Sharp cheekbones, intense eyes, a mouth set in a line that suggested barely controlled power. He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she caught his scent, expensive cologne mixed with winter air. He glanced at her belly, then met her eyes again. His voice was deep, accented, controlled. You contacted me, not a question, a statement. She nodded, too exhausted for fear. He reached for her suitcase without asking permission, lifted it effortlessly. Follow me. She followed because what alternative existed? Because something in his tone made her feel for the first time tonight that maybe she wasn't facing this alone. He led her to a car that probably cost more than she'd earned in her entire career. He opened the door, waited. She hesitated. "I don't even know who you are." He looked at her, and something flickered behind his eyes, something almost gentle. "No. But I'm the only thing standing between you and sleeping on the street tonight." She slid into the car. He closed the door carefully, as though she might shatter. Then he circled around and settled into the seat beside her. The driver pulled smoothly into traffic without a word. Isla stared through the window, hands folded protectively over her belly. "Thank you for this." Jae-sung didn't reply. He studied her reflection in the glass, the elegant curve of her profile, the exhaustion etched into her features, the way she held herself together despite obviously falling apart inside. He'd encountered desperate people before, seen them grovel, weep, fragment completely. But this woman, this stranger who'd messaged him by accident, sat in his vehicle like displaced royalty, weary but unbroken, and something about that made his hands curl into fists against his thighs. He wanted to know who had damaged her, wanted to understand why she was alone on Christmas Eve, pregnant and cast aside, wanted to destroy whoever was responsible. He forced himself to look forward. The car stopped before a building that stole Isla's breath, glass and steel piercing the night sky, modern and intimidating. A doorman materialized immediately, opened her door with a bow. Jae-sung stepped out, extended his hand. She took it because her legs were trembling. His palm was warm, calloused, strong. He didn't release her as he guided her inside, through a lobby that resembled a luxury hotel into an elevator requiring a security card. They ascended in silence, 50 floors. The doors opened directly into a penthouse, floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture that looked like sculpture, a panoramic view of Seoul that stole what little breath she had remaining. Jae-sung set her suitcase down, turned to face her. "You'll stay here tonight. Tomorrow we'll discuss next steps." Isla stared at him. "I can't compensate you for this." His expression remained unchanged. "I haven't asked for payment." She swallowed hard. "Then why are you helping me?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "Because you asked." His voice was soft, but something dark and absolute lurked beneath the surface. "And because anyone who would cast a pregnant woman into the snow doesn't deserve to exist in the same world as you." Her eyes burned. She looked away, blinking rapidly. He watched her battle against tears and felt something twist painfully in his chest. He wanted to touch her, wanted to pull her close and make promises he had no business making. Instead, he stepped back. "There's food in the kitchen. The bedroom is through that hallway. You're safe here." He turned toward the elevator. She called after him. "Wait, what should I call you?" He paused, glanced back over his shoulder. "Jae-sung." Then he was gone, the elevator doors sliding shut, leaving her alone in his sanctuary. Isla stood in the center of the penthouse, heart racing. She didn't know who Park Jae-sung was, didn't understand why he'd helped her. But as she walked toward the bedroom, as she collapsed onto a bed softer than anything she'd experienced, she understood one thing with absolute clarity. Her life had fundamentally changed, and she couldn't decide whether to feel grateful or terrified. She fell asleep before reaching a conclusion. Jae-sung returned to his office but didn't work. He sat in darkness, staring at his phone, at the message that had initiated everything. He'd had his people investigate within minutes, knew her complete name. Knew she'd been married to a corporate attorney who'd been unfaithful for 8 months. Knew the baby was due in 10 days. Knew everything except why the sight of her standing in the snow had made him feel like someone had reached into his chest and rearranged his entire internal architecture. He wasn't a good man. Wasn't the type who helped strangers from altruism. His empire was constructed on violence, control, loyalty purchased with fear and blood. But when he'd seen her, something had shifted. Something he couldn't articulate. He told himself it was temporary. Told himself he'd let her stay until she got situated, then send her on her way. Told himself he wouldn't get involved beyond basic assistance. He'd been lying to himself for decades. This was simply one more lie, except this time he almost believed it. The following morning, Isla woke to sunlight flooding unfamiliar windows. For a moment, disorientation clouded her thoughts. Then everything rushed back. Her husband. The snow, the stranger. She sat up slowly, one hand on her belly. The baby was calm this morning. She emerged from the bedroom to find the penthouse empty. But food waited on the counter. Fresh fruit, pastries, a note in sharp, precise handwriting. "Eat. I'll return this evening." She picked up a piece of melon and bit into it, sweetness exploding across her tongue. She hadn't realized how hungry she was, Hadn't realized how long it had been since someone had considered whether she'd eaten. She sat at the counter and cried while she had breakfast. Jae-sung spent the day managing business. A shipment that had vanished, a rival organization making territorial claims, a politician who needed reminding about their agreement. He moved through his world with the same cold precision he'd always employed. But every hour he checked his phone, checked the security feed from his penthouse, watched Isla move through his space like a graceful ghost, watched her sit by the windows with one hand on her belly, gazing out at the city, watched her fall asleep on his sofa despite having just awakened. And every time he looked at that screen, something in him grew heavier, more certain, more dangerous. By evening, he'd reached a decision. He walked into the penthouse just after sunset and found her in the kitchen attempting to prepare food. She turned when she heard him, and for a moment they simply looked at each other. She'd changed clothes, wearing something soft and flowing that draped over her pregnancy. Her hair was loose, her face bare of makeup. She looked younger than he'd thought, more vulnerable, more beautiful. He set his briefcase down, moved toward her. "You don't need to cook." She shrugged slightly. "I wanted to show my appreciation." He stopped in front of her, close enough to see the golden flecks in her hazel eyes. "You owe me nothing." She looked up at him and something passed between them, something neither could name yet. "Then why are you doing this?" He didn't have an answer, or perhaps he did and wasn't prepared to voice it. Instead, he reached past her, turned off the stove. "Come, sit. We need to talk." They sat across from each other at the dining table, the city sparkling below them. Jae-sung poured her water, watched her drink. Then he leaned back and studied her carefully. "Tell me what happened." Isla hesitated. Then slowly she told him everything. The affair, the accusations, the way her husband had looked at her like she was worthless. The cold, the fear, the baby moving inside her while she stood alone in the snow. Jae-sung listened without interruption. His expression didn't change, but his hands, resting on the table, gradually curled into tight fists. When she finished, the silence felt heavy. "He'll regret it." Jae-sung's voice was quiet, but something beneath it made Isla's pulse accelerate. She looked at him carefully. "What do you mean?" He met her gaze. "I mean he'll regret ever touching you, ever making you feel insignificant, ever discarding you like you were disposable." She swallowed. "You don't even know me." His smile was slow, predatory. "Not yet, but I will." The way he said it made something flutter dangerously in her chest, made her feel seen in a way she hadn't experienced in years. She looked away, warmth spreading across her cheeks. "I need to find my own place. I can't impose indefinitely." Jae-sung leaned forward. "You're not imposing, you're staying here. That's impossible, it's not." His tone allowed no argument. "You're 9 months pregnant, you have no funds, no support system, nowhere to go. You'll stay here until after the baby arrives. Then we'll determine what happens next." Isla stared at him. "Why would you do this?" He was quiet for an extended moment. Then he stood, walked around the table, stopped beside her chair, looked down at her with eyes that burned. "Because the moment you contacted me, you became my responsibility." She didn't know how to respond. Didn't know how to process the way he looked at her like she was something precious, something worth protecting. She only knew that when he walked away, when he disappeared into his office and left her alone, she felt his absence like a physical ache. And for the first time in months, fear didn't consume her. The days that followed felt surreal. Jae-sung left early and returned late, but he always checked on her, always ensured she had everything she needed. He hired a private doctor to examine her, a housekeeper to assist her, a driver in case she wanted to venture out. He asked for nothing in exchange. Isla tried to understand it, tried to comprehend why a man like him, clearly powerful, clearly dangerous, would go to such lengths for a stranger. But every time she asked, he deflected, changed subjects, looked at her with those dark eyes that made her heart race and her thoughts scatter. She stopped asking, started observing instead. She noticed how he moved, controlled and deliberate, like someone who'd spent his life fighting. She noticed the scars on his knuckles, the way his men spoke to him with mingled fear and reverence, the phone calls he took in languages she didn't understand. She wasn't naive. She knew he wasn't an ordinary businessman. Knew something darker existed beneath the expensive suits and polite manners. But instead of frightening her, it made her curious. Made her want to understand who Park Yi-sung really was. Made her wonder why he'd chosen to save her. 1 week after moving in, everything shifted. Yi-sung came home earlier than usual. Isla was in the living room reading. She looked up when she heard the door and her breath caught. He looked furious. His jaw was tight, his eyes cold. He walked past her without acknowledgement, poured himself whiskey, downed it in one motion. She stood slowly, pulse pounding. "What happened?" He didn't answer, just stared out the window, shoulders rigid. She walked toward him, stopped several feet away. Jae-sung. He turned, and the look in his eyes made her stomach drop. Your husband filed for divorce. Her breath left her lungs. What? Jae-sung's voice was flat. He's claiming you abandoned him, that the baby isn't his. He wants nothing to do with either of you. Isla's legs weakened. She sank onto the sofa, one hand pressed to her belly. Jae-sung crossed the room in 3 strides, knelt before her. Breathe. She tried, failed, tried again. He can't do that. The baby is his. I know. Jae-sung's voice gentled. He reached up, cupped her face. I know, and I'll prove it. But right now, you need to breathe. She looked at him, at the way he was watching her, and something inside her shattered. She started to cry. Not delicate tears, but deep, racking sobs that came from somewhere she'd been keeping locked for months. Jae-sung pulled her forward, wrapped his arms around her, let her cry against his shoulder. He didn't tell her to stop, didn't try to fix it, just held her. And in that moment, something shifted between them irrevocably. When Isla finally stopped crying, she pulled back, embarrassed. Her face was wet, her eyes swollen. She tried to apologize, but Jae-sung shook his head firmly. Don't. His thumb brushed across her cheek, wiping away moisture. You're allowed to break. You've been holding yourself together too long. She looked at him, truly looked, and saw something in his expression that made her pulse quicken. Something raw, something possessive. Why do you care so much? His jaw tightened. He stood abruptly, creating distance between them. Get some rest. We'll handle your husband tomorrow. He walked away before she could respond, left her sitting on the sofa with her heart pounding, wondering what she'd just glimpsed in his eyes. That night, Isla couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, one hand on her belly. The baby was restless tonight, turning and kicking. She whispered to her daughter, promised everything would be fine, even though she had no certainty of that. Around midnight. She abandoned the attempt at sleep and went to the kitchen for water. She found Jae-sung standing by the window, still fully dressed, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He turned when he heard her. For a long moment, they just looked at each other across the dark penthouse. Then he spoke. You should be sleeping. She walked toward him. So should you. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I don't sleep much. She stopped beside him, looked out at the city. What do you actually do? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, things that would make you run if you knew. She turned to face him, try me. His eyes met hers and she saw something flicker there, something like warning, like hunger. My family controls half the underground economy in Seoul. Shipping, property, real estate, information. We're not criminals in the traditional sense, but we're not innocent either. I've hurt people, destroyed lives. He expected her to flinch, to retreat. Instead, she said, and yet you saved me. His breath caught. That's different. Why? He set his glass down, turned to face her fully. Because you're different. The way he said it made heat bloom in her chest, made her aware of how close they were standing, how his eyes had dropped to her lips, how the air between them had changed, charged with electricity. She should step back, create distance. Instead, she asked, how long have you been watching me? His expression darkened. What? She'd noticed how he always anticipated her needs, how he'd known about the divorce before she did, how he looked at her sometimes like he'd been studying her for years. You knew who I was before I contacted you, didn't you? Jae-sung didn't deny it. I saw you 3 months ago. At a charity gala, you were with your husband. His voice roughened. You were wearing a green dress. You laughed at something and I couldn't look away. I had you investigated, learned everything about you, where you lived, what you enjoyed. Who you'd married. He stepped closer. I told myself it was just curiosity, that I'd forget about you. But then you contacted me and I knew. Knew what? Her voice was barely audible. He reached up, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her skin. That I'd never let you go. The confession hung between them, heavy and dangerous. Isla's heart raced. She should be afraid, should be disturbed by his obsession. Instead, all she felt was heat, desire, a pull toward him that terrified and thrilled her equally. Jae-sung, tell me to stop. His hand slid to her jaw, tilted her face up. Tell me you don't feel this too, and I'll walk away. I'll help you get back on your feet and never touch you again. She couldn't say it, couldn't lie, because she did feel it, had been feeling it since their eyes met in the snow. This impossible, magnetic pull toward a man who should terrify her, but instead made her feel safer than she'd ever felt. She reached up, covered his hand with hers. I don't want you to stop. Something in his control snapped. He pulled her close, one hand sliding into her hair, the other careful against her lower back, mindful of her pregnancy. He looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. You're pregnant, vulnerable. I'm not fragile. Her voice was steady. And I'm not afraid of you. His eyes searched hers. Then he leaned down and kissed her. Slow, deep, devastatingly gentle, like he was memorizing the taste of her, like he'd been starving for this moment. Isla melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt. The kiss was everything, months of loneliness, weeks of tension, days of unspoken desire. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jae-sung rested his forehead against hers. You're mine now. It should have sounded possessive, controlling. Instead, it sounded like a vow, like a promise. She whispered, okay. He kissed her again, deeper this time, then swept her into his arms. She gasped, clutched at his shoulders. Jae-sung, I'm too heavy, you're perfect. He carried her to his bedroom, set her down gently on his bed. The room was dark except for city lights streaming through the windows. He stood over her, chest rising and falling, eyes burning. If you want to stop, tell me now. She reached for him, pulled him down beside her. I don't want to stop. What happened next was slow, reverent. His hands on her skin, her breath in his ear, whispered words and swallowed moans. He was careful with her, achingly gentle, but hunger lurked underneath, possession and need. And when they finally came together, when he buried his face in her neck and breathed her name like a prayer, Isla felt something inside her chest crack open, felt herself falling into something she couldn't name. Later, as they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his hand protective over her belly, she felt the baby kick. Jae-sung went still. Was that? She smiled. Yes. He pressed his palm flat against her stomach, felt another kick. Something shifted in his expression, something soft and dangerous. I'm going to protect both of you. His voice was fierce. Anyone who tries to hurt you will have to go through me first. She believed him. And that terrified her because she was beginning to realize that Park Jae-sung wasn't just dangerous to her enemies. He was dangerous to her heart. When Isla woke, the bed was empty. Panic flared in her chest. She sat up, looked around the unfamiliar room. Then she heard voices from outside, low and tense. She pulled on Jae-sung's shirt, walked to the door. Jae-sung was standing in the hallway, fully dressed, talking to one of his men. When he saw her, his expression softened. He said something sharp in Korean and the man disappeared. Then he walked to her, cupped her face. I have to go. Her stomach dropped. When will you be back? Tonight. But something in his eyes made her afraid. She grabbed his wrist. What's wrong? He hesitated. Then he said, your husband is making threats, spreading rumors, trying to destroy your reputation before the divorce is finalized. Anger flashed through her. Let him. Jae-sung's smile was cold. I intend to. He kissed her forehead. Stay here. Don't leave the penthouse. I'll have men outside. Jae-sung, trust me. She nodded, watched him leave, and tried to ignore the fear crawling up her spine. The day passed slowly. Isla tried to distract herself, read, watch television, ate the food the housekeeper prepared. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. By evening, she was packing. The baby was restless too, kicking hard enough to make her wince. She pressed a hand to her belly. I know, sweetheart. I'm worried too. The sun set. City lights came on. Still no word from Jae-sung. She tried calling. No answer. Texted. Nothing. Panic started building. Then around 9, the elevator doors opened. But it wasn't Jae-sung who stepped out. It was 3 men she didn't recognize, and they were smiling. Isla backed away, heart pounding. Who are you? The tallest one spoke in accented English. Friends of your husband. He's very upset that you ran away. Ice flooded her veins. Get out. He laughed. We're here to deliver a message. They moved toward her. She ran, made it to the bedroom, tried to lock the door, but they were faster, stronger. One grabbed her arm, yanked her back. She screamed, fought, but she was 9 months pregnant and outnumbered. They dragged her toward the elevator. She clawed at them, desperate, terrified, not for herself, but for her baby. Please, I'm pregnant. Please, the tall one backhanded her. Pain exploded across her face. The world tilted, and the last thing she heard before darkness claimed her was the sound of the elevator doors closing. Jae-sung walked into his penthouse 2 hours later and knew immediately something was catastrophically wrong. The silence was too complete, too cold. He called her name. No answer. He moved through the space, his heart pounding harder with each empty room. Then he saw it, blood on the floor, a broken vase, signs of a struggle. Rage, unlike anything he'd ever experienced, crashed through him. He pulled out his phone, made a call. Find her. Now, his second-in-command hesitated. Boss, we don't know who. I don't care who took her. I don't care where they are. Find her or I burn this city to ashes. He hung up, stood in the center of his penthouse, breathing hard, hands shaking. Someone had taken her. Taken his woman, his responsibility, the mother of a child he'd already started thinking of as his own. And they would pay. He would make them beg for death before he was finished. His phone rang 15 minutes later. We found her. Warehouse in Incheon. Your wife's husband hired local thugs. They're holding her there. Jae-sung was moving before the sentence finished. How many? 6. Leave them breathing. I want to handle this myself. He grabbed his gun, his knife, got in his car, and drove toward Incheon with murder in his heart. Isla came to slowly. Her head throbbed, her face ached. She was tied to a chair in a dark, cold space that smelled like rust and fear. Panic clawed at her throat. She tried to move, but the ropes were tight, tried to scream, but her mouth was gagged. Then she felt it, wetness between her legs, pressure low in her belly. No, the baby. It was too early, but her body didn't care. Contractions started, slow at first, then faster, harder. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel pain and terror as her body tried to bring new life into this nightmare. One of the men noticed, laughed. Looks like the baby's coming. Should we help? The others joined in, mocking, cruel. Isla closed her eyes and prayed for her baby, for herself, for Jae-sung to find her before it was too late. Then the lights went out, gunshots, screaming, the sound of bones breaking. Isla couldn't see anything, but she could hear someone moving through the darkness like death itself, could hear men begging, pleading, then silence. The lights came back on. Jae-sung stood in the center of the warehouse, blood on his hands, bodies at his feet. He was breathing hard, eyes wild. Then he saw her. Everything else ceased to exist. He crossed the space in seconds, knelt before her, cut the ropes, pulled the gag from her mouth. Isla. God, Isla the baby. Her voice broke. Jae-sung, the baby's coming. His face went white. He scooped her into his arms, ran for the car. Hold on, just hold on. She gripped his shirt, tried to breathe through the pain. I'm scared. He looked down at her and his eyes were fierce. I've got you. I've got you both. Nothing's going to happen to you, I swear it. They made it to the hospital in record time. Jae-sung carried her through the emergency room doors, shouting for help. Nurses rushed forward, doctors appeared. They tried to take her from his arms. He wouldn't let go. Sir, you have to, I'm not leaving her. His voice was raw. I'm not leaving her. Isla reached up, touched his face. It's okay. I'll be okay. He looked at her like she was the only thing holding him together. Then finally, reluctantly, he let the doctors take her, watched them wheel her toward the delivery room, and stood in the hallway covered in blood that wasn't his, shaking. One of his men appeared beside him. Boss, the husband, bring him to me. His voice was empty, cold. I want to see him tonight. Inside the delivery room, Isla fought, pushed, screamed. The pain was unbearable, the fear worse. But through it all, she thought of Jae-sung, of his hands on her face, his promise that everything would be okay, his vow to protect her. And when the baby finally came, when she heard that first cry, when they placed her daughter on her chest, she looked down at the tiny, perfect face and whispered, "We made it, baby. We made it." The nurse smiled. She's beautiful. Does she have a name? Isla looked toward the door, wondered if Jae-sung was still out there, wondered if he'd keep his promises now that the crisis had passed, wondered if he'd stay or if, like everyone else, he'd disappear. The door opened. Jae-sung walked in, his eyes going immediately to the bed, to her, to the baby in her arms. He stopped, stared, and something in his expression cracked. He crossed to her, knelt beside the bed, looked at the tiny child like she was a miracle. She's here. Isla's voice was exhausted, emotional. She's perfect. Jae-sung reached out, touched the baby's tiny hand. She gripped his finger, and Isla watched something transform in him, watched him fall completely, irreversibly in love. He looked up at her. What's her name? Isla smiled through tears. I was thinking. Hana, it means flower in Korean. His eyes went bright. He leaned forward, kissed her forehead. It's perfect. She's perfect. You're perfect. He stayed with her all night, held her hand, held the baby, refused to leave even when the nurses told him visiting hours were over. And Isla, exhausted and overwhelmed and still terrified of what came next, let herself believe, let herself hope. 3 days later, Isla was released from the hospital. Jae-sung took her and Hana back to the penthouse. He'd prepared everything. A nursery, baby clothes, every possible thing they might need. But as the days passed, Isla started to notice things. The way Jae-sung would disappear for hours, the tension in his shoulders, the phone calls he took in other rooms. She told herself it was just business, told herself he was just busy. But doubt crept in, whispered, "You're a burden. You're not his responsibility. He'll get tired of you." On the 5th night, she made a decision. She would leave, find her own place, figure out how to survive on her own. She couldn't keep depending on a man who'd already given her so much. It wasn't fair to him. That night, after Jae-sung left for another meeting, Isla packed a bag, wrote a note thanking him for everything, took Hana and slipped out of the penthouse. She made it to a hotel, cheap, basic, but hers. She fed Hana, rocked her to sleep, and tried to convince herself she'd made the right choice. Jae-sung came home to an empty penthouse. At first, he didn't understand. Then he saw the note. Rage and panic exploded through him in equal measure. He called her. No answer. Called again. Nothing. He had his people track her phone, found the hotel, and drove there with his heart in his throat. He pounded on the door until she opened it. She looked exhausted, beautiful, holding Hana against her chest. He pushed past her into the room, looked around at the shabby space, and felt something inside him break. "What are you doing?" His voice was rough. Isla lifted her chin. "What I should have done from the beginning, standing on my own. By running away, I'm not running, I'm leaving, there's a difference." He took a step toward her. "You left because you think I don't want you here." She looked away. "You've done enough. I can't keep you. Think this is charity." His voice rose. "You think I've been helping you out of some sense of obligation. What else would it be?" He laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "I'm in love with you." The words hit her like a physical blow. She stared at him. "What?" Jae-sung crossed the space between them, cupped her face with both hands. "I'm in love with you. Have been since the moment I saw you in that green dress. Since you contacted me in the snow. Since you looked at me like I wasn't a monster. I'm in love with you and Hana and the life we're building. And you leaving, that's not protecting yourself. That's running because you're scared." Tears streamed down her face. "Of course I'm scared. You're Park Jae-sung. You're dangerous and powerful and you could have anyone. Why would you want me?" His eyes burned. "Because you're mine. Because the thought of you not being in my home, in my bed, in my life makes me want to burn the world down. Because when I look at Hana, I see our future, not yours, ours." He kissed her, desperate, claiming, "Come home." She was crying now. "What if you change your mind? What if I won't?" His voice was absolute. "I don't change my mind about things that matter. And you matter more than anything." She looked at him, at the raw honesty in his eyes, at the way he held her like she was precious, and she made her choice. "Okay." Relief crashed through him. He pulled her close, careful of the baby between them. "Say it again." She smiled through tears. "Okay, I'll come home." He kissed her again, then looked down at Hana, sleeping peacefully through all the drama. "Both of you. Forever." They went back to the penthouse, but as they walked through the door, Jae-sung's phone rang. He looked at the screen, his expression went cold. "I have to take this." He walked into his office, closed the door. Isla heard raised voices, anger, then silence. When he came out, his face was grim. "What's wrong?" He looked at her. "Your ex-husband, he's not done. He's filed a custody suit. Claims you're unfit, that you're living with a criminal. He wants Hana." Isla went cold. "He can't. He doesn't even want her. He wants to hurt you. And he's using her to do it." Jae-sung's voice was tight. "But he's made a mistake." "What do you mean?" Jae-sung's smile was dangerous. "He's threatened what's mine. And now he's going to learn what that costs." Before Isla could respond, the lights went out. The entire building went dark. Jae-sung moved instantly, pushing her behind him. "Stay down." She heard footsteps, many of them coming from the elevator, from the stairs, surrounding them. Jae-sung pulled his gun, his body a shield between her and whatever was coming. A voice called out from the darkness, familiar, her ex-husband. "You really thought you could steal my wife and get away with it?" Isla's blood ran cold. Jae-sung's voice was deadly calm. "She was never yours. She's the mother of my child, and I'm taking both of them back." The lights came on and Isla's heart stopped. Her ex-husband stood in the center of the room, surrounded by armed men. More than Jae-sung could fight alone. He smiled at her, cold, cruel. "Hello, darling, miss me?" And just like that, everything Isla had fought for, everything she'd built with Jae-sung, hung in the balance. What happens when a dangerous love collides with deadly revenge? When a man who controls Seoul's underworld faces the one threat he can't eliminate? When a mother must choose between safety and the only man who's ever truly protected her? The penthouse, the standoff, the baby sleeping between two worlds. Some battles are fought with guns, others with hearts. This one will demand both. Part 2 drops soon, and trust me, besties, you are not ready for what's coming. Will Jae-sung's love be enough to save them? Or will Isla's past finally destroy her future? Do you think this love story is doomed? Like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the explosive conclusion. Drop a comment if you're Team Jae-sung. See you in Part 2, besties. The real war is just beginning.